Welcome back everyone to another brief discussion on a Pokemon that's... You guys all seem to like the shorter format from the King and Lure video. Also, we hit the funny joke subscriber number, so thank you all for the validation on that. But okay, Raticate. So, something I noticed that's kind of weird is that usually when I do these videos, I see the video's Pokemon on at least a few teams when I'm getting footage, even if it's just on a joke team. Yeah, no one uses Raticate. I saw someone using Kabutops seriously. I saw Poliwrath a few times. I saw Venusaur more than you'd expect. I saw Golduck, Rapidash, Ninetales, and Gyarados on the same team. I saw Lead Charizard. I saw so much Lead Charizard. Are you people okay? But no other Raticates. Smogon directly says that it is not recommended on most teams, and it's lower ranked than that fucker Machamp, so this is gonna be a fun one. I'm not stalling at all. I know I usually start these videos off with what the Pokemon are capable of, and then trail off into the problems, but this time I think we're gonna need to flip it, because we have way more problems than niches here. So Raticate is basically a worse Persian, in that it's an objectively weaker Tauros-esque Pokemon, with a tiny niche Tauros does not have. If you watch my Persian video, you'll know that the combination of Stab Slash and Screech Hyper Beam can be surprisingly effective with a good setup. The normal moveset struggles against Chansey without some luck. If Hyper Beam doesn't crit, you're opening yourself up to a Thunder Wave or damage, and Persian does not have that much bulk to be taking stray hits. But with Screech, Hyper Beam versus Chansey can do a one-hit KO. It's not a perfect combo, Screech is only 85% accurate, then 90% on Hyper Beam of course, but doing this successfully will do more damage than 2 slashes in a row. Meanwhile for Raticate, we get Hyper Beam, we get Tail Whip, which isn't as helpful as Screech, but is still okay for utility, and something that on paper sounds just as useful as Stab Slash. Super Fang. The Fang works in that it will always do half of your opponent's remaining HP for damage. So against a Mon at full, it will do 50% regardless of type, at 80% it will do 40% of damage, so on and so forth. This can be used to get monsters with limited or no recovery options into an actually good Pokemon's KO range. Before we get into the insane number of issues with Raticate though, I think we should start with the problems that Super Fang has, as it's mandatory for Raticate to run it in order to have any kind of niche material. And honestly, one of the problems that's a little more funny to look at, we're really susceptible to getting one hit by counter, as having a predictable move that hits for 50% on a healthy Pokemon is just like putting my ex-wife in the same room as my brother, because it's gonna hit 99.6% of the time. Which, thinking about her again, really makes me realize that Super Fang having 16 PP and 90% accuracy is only questionably reliable. It also means you're going to lose against anything with Recover or Soft Boil, especially if they outspeed you, because unlike Persian, Raticate's speed isn't exactly what you want it to be. It's not bad, but being slower than Alakazam and especially Starmie is genuinely awful for us. Also, if you get burned somehow, you're fucked, kinda. But that will basically never happen unless God really hates you. But I did get the 1 in 256 for accuracy and health regen in the same match, so that's definitely a sign. The problems keep on coming though. Because our stats are between mediocre and downright bad, tons of common attacks are just devastating to us. So many in fact, that here's just a list of moves that 2-hit and 3-hit KO us. And on top of taking attacks badly, and our less than great attack stat sending moves out badly also, our move pool is deceptively bad to mix it up a bit. We do get a variety of moves to use, including Thunder and Blizzard, but coming out 50 special, these moves are pretty unreliable. The special exception, see what I did there, is Bubble Beam, as the 4x damage is enough to negate our low special, and still get a pretty consistent 2-hit KO on Rhydon and Golem. You can try to use Thunderbolt, it will take out Cloyster, Slowbro, and Starmie with a crit after Super Fang, but that's relying on getting that 19%-ish crit, and in a few dozen matches of trying, I couldn't actually get this to happen in game. After all, a boosted Slowbro only needs one turn to wipe us, Cloyster is really just an unlucky Pokemon to be up against, and Starmie outspeeds us, so we really need to rely on Tail Whip induced paralysis stat drop shenanigans in order to beat it. Which warrants a quick explanation in case you haven't watched any of these videos. I don't know why you'd be watching these if you haven't, but check them out, because they are all going to explain this way better than I can. But that's okay, because it's time for our newest segment, trying to learn stuff with me without a script. What is going on, everyone? I am thoroughly zooted, but let's learn something. Okay, so this is the original post on Smogon forums explaining the stat drop glitch when it was first discovered back in like 2014, but it links at the bottom to another page that already had it documented, Dragonfly Cave, and this one goes into a lot more detail about like the actual base games and stuff, where it talks about badge boosts, basically everything that would not happen in competitive Pokemon, like what if happens like with Rage, and like who the fuck uses Rage. But anyway, if you want more information, this is going to be in the details of the video, so this, but I just want to go through this real quick because this is going to impact the game, the meta, and everything that we talk about here. This is already going bad. Okay, it's fine. It's fine. Let's keep on trucking. Okay, so the mechanics involving stat modifications in RBY are really weird with a lot of glitches involved. Thankfully, it became simpler when we take badge boosts out of the picture. At this point, we all know we all know agility and Swords Dance / Sharpen will ignore paralysis and burn stat drops respectively, but there's a lot more to it than that. Basically, whenever a move that affects the stat stage, aka stat stage stat modifiers in any way, of either Pokemon in battle is successfully used, or if a move like Bubble Beam's secondary effect occurs. If the Pokemon whose turn it is not right now is paralyzed or burned, the corresponding stat penalties will be applied again to that Pokemon. Here's an example. My opponent has 20 attack. During my turn, I will use Ember and burn it. Its attack stat becoming 10. In my next turn, I will use Double Team, a stat modifying move. Not only will my evasion be raised due to Double Team's effect, but since it's my turn and the opponent's burned, my attack stat will be halved again, becoming 5. Whenever one certain stat of a Pokemon is affected by a stat modifying... God, this is a lot of words. Whenever one certain stat of a Pokemon is affected by a stat modifying move, the stat is recalculated again, ignoring any stat modifications not related to stat level, aka stat stages. So, if say, my original speed stat is 100, and my speed stat level is 7 plus 0, and I use agility, or my opponent uses string shot on me, the resulting speed stat will become 266 respectively. No matter what. What? Yeah, yes, actually, definitely, that definitely makes sense. Yeah. Why are you watching this? But if I'm paralyzed in the second case, string shot, my speed will be quoted, becoming 16. Oh, string shot drops speed by a third. Okay, I get it now. That makes sense. Notice how my speed isn't quoted in the first case, agility, because I use agility in my own turn. If my opponent happens to be paralyzed when I use agility myself, or amnesia, or growl, etc., his red flag speed will be quoted. The same applies to attack if burned, halving it. So in short, here's how it goes. This is triggered whenever a stat modifying move is successfully occurred. Applies the move effect. Recalculate only if the stat. Recalculate only the affected stat based on stat level modifier only, ignoring any old paralysis that burn stat drops if applicable. Check if the player whose turn it is not paralyzed or burned. If the answer is no, we're done. If paralyzed, give true quarter its speed. If burned, give true half its attack. Note the minimum stat is always 1. So yeah, basically what happens You take 2 Pokemon. God, this is harder than I thought it was gonna be. So if you use a stat boosting move on your Pokemon while it's if you use Agility on like Zapdos when it's paralyzed, its speed will be increased, ignoring Paralysis stat drops. Makes sense. But if it's something on the level where your opponent is paralyzed and you use something like Agility or Amnesia, their speed is quartered again. So it goes from 25% down to like, what would be a quarter 25%? Like 6, something like that, 6.25%, yeah. And I'm guessing the same would happen with Burn then. So you'd be at a quarter attack and then 12.5 attack, and it can't go lower than 1, but you can keep dividing it down and down and down. And that's why Slowbro is so fucking good, because it paralyzes you and uses Amnesia. So then even if you paralyze Slowbro, you're slower than it, unless you have a Pokemon that has a stat boosting move, which would be like a Zapdos, which already beats Slowbro, so why does it matter? Or like something else, I don't know. But yeah, that's what stat drop glitch modify thing explained vaguely. Go watch another video somewhere over here that will explain it better, but back to you, me. This is such a bad idea. So we have all of those problems with Raticate, and those are the problems with Raticate as an individual Pokemon. There's the whole team that you need to worry about, and there's just a ton of coverage problems if you're running Raticate. We can't afford to drop a big 3 member, and along with needing both a consistent lead and a sleeper, leads to some pretty stagnant picks to fill those roles. And yeah, these are great Pokemon, and for normal types it might sound good on paper, but it leads to a ton of opportunity cost in the early to mid game. There's a few other ways to fill these needed roles, such as Jinx and Zapdos, or Cloyster, to deal with Raticate's more notorious counters, or even Lee Jolteon and Gengar teamed up with a Sing Chansey, but we're really reaching here. Raticate is honestly just taking up space for an overall better Pokemon. So like, why bother? Why run it? Because sometimes you can do shit like this. Let's reiterate, Raticate is not a good Pokemon, but we can do a few things that are pretty cool. For one, the Rhydon matchup is shockingly good. We get a 94% chance to 2-hit it with Bubble Beam, bypassing Super Fang's 90% accuracy, hindering our other potential 2-hit KO matchups. On top of that, we have a combined about 12% chance to 1-hit KO Rhydon with a crit Bubble Beam, which is just a great idea in theory. But speaking of 2-hit KO matchups, there's actually a couple of them. Non-reflect variants of Chansey and Alakazam, along with Jinx, Jolteon, and Victory Ball, will always fall to Super Fang into Hyper Beam. Meanwhile, Starmie and, I guess, Hypno, 96% and 86% of the time respectively will also. On top of that, a ton of Pokemon can be taken down in 3 hits, and we actually have a few combinations of what those 3 moves can be. Of course, Super Fang, Body Slam, Hyper Beam is the classic 3-hit combo and will work on most, if not all of the tier, besides the rocks, which we have a much better option for, and Gengar. What most people won't realize is you can actually use Body Slam first, as the second round of damage being from Super Fang will almost always be enough for the Hyper Beam damage threshold anyway, and then you get the 30% chance to paralyze on turn 1 instead of turn 2. But another option for us is Super Fang Tail Whip Hyper Beam. This won't work on every Pokemon, of course, but against an already paralyzed Zapdos and Jolteon, along with a Starmie or Alakazam, they are very likely to go for a turn 1 Thunder Wave, leading to us still outspeeding them on round 3. And then for those pesky Reflect users, going for 2 Super Fangs followed by the Big Beam will wipe out any of them that aren't Snorlax. The problem with this, well, the first of many, is that anything faster than us can and will cheese recovery until we miss our 90% accurate but 100% predictable move, then paralyze us, and then we just don't have Raticate anymore, just like Blue. But besides being some of the most OG creepypasta, Raticate's life is still true hell, because without intense paralysis support, so much of Materia outspeeds us, and getting paralyzed ourselves just means we can get derailed completely, and Raticate is not a Pokemon who gets an extra turn here and there like your Chanseys or Eggies or Snorlaxes do. Unfortunately, our move pool is so predictable, it's incredibly easy to get cheesed out on Hyper Beam. But most of the time, your options are to throw out the Hyper Beam and risk some switch shenanigans, or toss out something safer and risk getting knocked out to whatever decided to stay in. We have so many good matchups, but those matchups are dependent on being in a specific game state, and if you're not, if the opponent just has a bunch of fast, non-status special attackers left, and you have Raticate, your Tauros, and whatever else, you're probably gonna lose. Okay, positive thinking time. I will stand on the mountain that Raticate is a pretty good turn 1 Gengar switch-in. Yes, Hyper Beam, Body Slam, and even our Mighty Tail Whip might be useless, but we can still 4-hit KO it with 2 Super Fangs and 2 Bubble Beams consistently, while Gengar has to hit us with either 3 Thunderbolts or 4 Nightshades, put us to sleep, or explode on us. Which isn't great, but what you ideally want to do is 1 Super Fang, and then a Bubble Beam to get the speed drop so you outspeed on turns 3 and 4, then a second Super Fang, and a second Bubble Beam. If everything hits, and Gengar is running Nightshade over Thunderbolt, and your parents are proud of you, you just won the game in spirit. And if none of that happens, and Raticate falls asleep on that turn 1 switch, that means your other better Pokemon can't also be put to sleep. Which also applies to every turn 1 sleeper, I suppose. Gengar is just the funniest. Purple Gay! Or like, please explode on Raticate, that's the funniest thing ever. Back to positivity land. If your opponent's Chansey gets paralyzed, and they're already kinda in a bad spot and can't switch out easily, Raticate can pretty reliably take it out. We'll probably take a status, but paralysis is more than worth it. And y'all already know Raticate was born to be freeze bait. Unfortunately, the other normal types are not as kind to us. Tauros outspeeds and can 2-hit us. Meanwhile, Snorlax is just too much for Raticate to handle. Any of its moves are devastating, and it's one of the only monsters whose Reflect is just too strong to break through with Super Fang. It's not only the big 3 either. Even way further down the tier list, Persian still 2-hits us with Slash, and even Dodrio can beat us in a 1-on-1. We do smack Venomoth and Primeape pretty good though. But Rapidash still curb stomps us. Don't you goddamn worry, Rapistans.
Just thinking now! Curb stomp! Gonna see a new champ! Uh-oh, we're gonna see it!
Besides our 4, maybe you could argue 5 possible moves, there's a few offbeat picks that you think can really help you until you realize 50 special isn't really anything at all. Blizzard is really attractive for the Eggy and Zapdos matchups, but it does such an insignificant amount more damage than Body Slam. You're better off banking on getting a freeze than actually running it for the damage. And like I mentioned earlier, Thunderbolt is basically useless, although it will cleanly knock out Cloyster in 3 hits, which is something, I guess. Nothing better Pokemon aren't already doing, but hey, it is a thing. The problem is that in order to run any other special move, you really need to ditch Bubble Beam, which is your key for the Rhydon matchup. Even going from it to Blizzard isn't an option, as we go from just a 7% chance to not 2-hit KO, and a respectable 64% chance to 1-hit with a crit, to with Blizzard, just a 17% chance to 2-hit KO, and a measly 10% chance to 1-hit with a crit. Plus, you lose the 10% accuracy that Bubble Beam has in the Rhydon matchup. And if you're running Thunderbolt, your Rhydon matchup goes to a guaranteed 4-hit KO, eliminating arguably our best matchup. God, this is supposed to be the positive side of the video, isn't it? Well, like, those creepypastas sure were something, weren't they? But yeah, I think we're about done here. Raticate is a Pokemon, definitely. You can use it. I don't recommend it. You might catch a low ladder player off guard enough to get some success, but literally any seasoned player can get around Raticate pretty easily. Different team compositions might help it, but from my own experience, it's just taking your team from 6v6 to something closer to 5.5v6. It's giving Machamp vibes, and that is to say, shit. Don't use Raticate in RBYOU. It's a bad idea. But remember, Raticate isn't an OU Pokemon. For a very good reason, but it's still just an NU Pokemon doing its best. So maybe go try it there. I never have. I've never ventured beyond RBYOU because autism, but I'd really like to. So I want to get into a new RBY tier, but what's your recommendations for me? Comment down below what you would all want to see. I'm personally leaning towards UU or PU, but I could definitely be talked into becoming an NU stan. And be sure to subscribe to see what comes of that in the next video. But yeah, that's about everything. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch y'all next time.